Chapter 1. The hectic hospital. Fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly overhead, casting an unforgiving glow over the bustling emergency room at St. Margaret's Hospital. Enrolled nurse, Emily Brooks, hurried down the narrow corridor, her white uniform stained with splatters of unidentified substances, and her heart pounding with anxiety. The night shift was in full swing, and there was teeming with patients seeking help for an array of ailments and injuries. "Emily, we've got a critical case in room 3. The charge nurse, Lisa, shouted as she rushed past. With no time to catch her breath, Emily hastened to her destination, weaving through the chaos of doctors, nurses, and patients. Room 3's door burst open, revealing a chaotic scene. A middle-aged man lay unconscious on the gurney, his face pallid, and wires connected to various monitors. The attending physician, Dr. Reynolds, was barking orders at the frazzled medical team. "We need to intubate now," Dr. Reynolds ordered, his eyes never leaving the lifeless patient. Emily was tasked with preparing the necessary equipment for intubation. Her fingers fumbled as she searched for the laryngoscope, the tube, and the bag valve mask. Panic gnawed at her insides as she struggled to remember the steps of the procedure she had practiced countless times during her training. The seconds seemed to stretch into minutes as Emily located the laryngoscope and handed it to the respiratory therapist. The patient's oxygen levels plummeted, and Emily felt her chest tighten with fear. The doctor's glare bore into her, and she could sense his impatience. As the medical team battled to save the patient's life, Emily was suddenly overcome by the pressure and her own doubt. She reached for the endotracheal tube, but her trembling hands betrayed her, causing the tube to slip from her grasp. In that critical moment, Emily made a grave mistake. She accidentally dislodged the patient's breathing tube, causing a dangerous interruption in his oxygen supply. Chaos erupted in the room as alarms blared, and the patient's condition deteriorated rapidly. Dr. Reynolds and the respiratory therapist struggled to reposition the tube and restore the man's oxygen flow. All the while, Emily stood there, frozen in shock, watching her unintentional error wreak havoc. Chapter 2. The Unfolding Nightmare. The hospital administration was quick to launch an investigation into the incident. Emily was taken aside for questioning, her mind still clouded by the traumatic events in room 3. The guilt weighed heavily on her shoulders as she recounted the chain of events leading up to the patient's worsening condition. A few days later, the worst was confirmed. The patient, Mr. Jonathan Mitchell, had suffered irreversible brain damage due to the interruption in his oxygen supply. The hospital's legal team was informed, and Emily found herself at the center of a potential malpractice lawsuit. Emily's world was unraveling. She faced sleepless nights, plagued by guilt and the fear of losing her nursing license. The hospital's insurance provider began negotiations with Mr. Mitchell's family, offering a substantial settlement in hopes of avoiding a costly legal battle. Chapter 3. The trial months passed, and Emily was required to testify in court. The atmosphere was tense as the jury listened to her account of that fateful night in room 3. The prosecutor argued that her negligence had led to Mr. Mitchell's life-altering injuries, while the defense painted her as a dedicated nurse caught in an overwhelming situation. The courtroom was a pressure cooker, and Emily's anxiety reached its peak as she answered the barrage of questions from both sides. The image of Mr. Mitchell's suffering haunted her every waking moment. Chapter 4. The verdict. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated. Emily's future hung in the balance, and she couldn't bear the thought of being responsible for the devastation wrought upon Mr. Mitchell and his family. The verdict was delivered, and the courtroom fell into an eerie silence. Emily was found not guilty of malpractice, but the hospital was ordered to pay a substantial settlement to Mr. Mitchell's family. The hospital's reputation was tarnished, and Emily felt a bittersweet relief. Chapter 5. A new beginning. Emily knew that the nightmare wasn't over. She would forever carry the weight of her mistake, even if the court had cleared her of legal wrongdoing. The tragedy had changed her, deepening her dedication to her profession and her commitment to patient safety. As she returned to work at St. Margaret's Hospital, Emily promised herself that she would never let the frantic pace of their compromise patient care. She was determined to learn from her mistakes and become a better nurse, one who would ensure that every patient received the care and attention they deserved. no matter the circumstances. And in the midst of the chaos, she found the strength to rebuild her life, one step at a time, hoping that the lessons she had learned would prevent others from making the same costly errors in the high-stress world of healthcare.